Welcome to Symposium entitled Before the Masterpiece, Exploring the Creative Process. The symposium studies speakers from around the world with a range of backgrounds. It explores the creative and design process, particularly an analysis through the divergent means of making, mediums, trainings, and backgrounds. From visual and engineers working in illustration, photography, and words, to designers, architects working in revitalization and emerging technology. The conference speaker selection is curated in an effort to bring together these divergent modes to broaden the perspectives and lexicon of the architecture training. This symposium seeks to provide an international dialogue for students currently at Wenzhou-Kean University. I'd like to give a warm welcome to all of our guest speakers. If we could just join in welcoming them. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank them. Some of them traveled from around the world to be here. Others are up late at night, ready to talk over the live stream. And so all of them have made efforts to be here on your behalf. And I hope it's beneficial for everyone. So just to be noted, we are attempting to make this a live event around the world. And with that comes some challenges and technical issues. So please bear with us as we deal with those. We'll start with Dimitri Kim, and hopefully you'll be able to hear him in the live. If it doesn't work, we'll move on to Jessica and come back to him at a later time in the program. But just to introduce Dimitri, he's an architect and chief researcher at the X Lab, which stands for X Manifold Applied Design Research Laboratory, a transdisciplinary creative practice working in all scales of projects in architecture, interior design, product, and urban environments. Previous clients include Sony, Samsung, Adobe, NYU, Columbia University, and NASA's Arrowhead Research Lab. Dimitri received a Master's of Science in Advanced Architectural Design, the MSc from Columbia University. He has a master's degree from SCIAR, my alma mater, and a bachelor's of fine arts in graphic design from the University of Hawaii. He's a fellow of Columbia University's GSAP incubator at the New Museum in New York. He teaches visual studies and professional practice at Parsons and New York University, a school of interior design. He's currently a visiting professor and digital coordinator of design at the University of Utah College of Architecture and Planning in their NDE program, and a faculty fellow at the Digital Media Lab. And with that, we'll get the floor to Dimitri. Turn off the mics here.
Hello. So what I don't know if you can hear me, but what I want to check is whether or not you can see my screen so I can share the presentation with you. Let's see, screen share. So I'm sharing my screen. Do you see it?
Yeah, we see your screen.
Okay. All right. Whenever you are ready.
We're ready.
Okay. So hello, hi. So unfortunately, I've made this into a dual screen, so I can't see all of you. But then again, I won't be able to see you anyway, so I'll just do this kind of a trick of the magic. So thank you for the great introduction, Ralph. It's a huge time difference. It is a very late here in Utah. It's 11:30 p.m. to be exact. In fact, I have to get going in about an hour because they'll close down the building. So thank you for the introduction. As Ralph was saying, my name is Dimitri. I am an architect and chief researcher at my boutique design and research think tank, X Lab. And I'm currently at University of Utah as a visiting professor and a digital coordinator. So I'm here to talk about Hello? That sounded really odd and bizarre. There was like a echoing thing. Am I coming out clear?
Yes, okay.
Okay, all right. So I'm here to talk about, I guess, my creative process, and which means also the creative process here at the X Lab. So as it is, and my creative process, which again is a parallel to the creative process at the lab, which is it has always been a collaborative process. So it isn't a sort of a one authorship and one artist designated duties to the individuals below, but rather it starts with creative ideas between individuals, and it ends with creative collaboration, both physical and productive wise, as a means to complete the project, whether it's a purely research or, as you can see from the displays, we do a number of limited, shall we say, fabrication projects for limited engagement installations. So these are some of the projects that we've done in the past. So I would like to start with this image. This is a screen capture from a very old film called The Metropolis by Fritz Lang. It's image of one of the central character named Dr. Rotwang, which is...
We're actually not seeing your screen.
Okay, what's happening? Because...
We just see you. We see you, not your screen.
Okay, let me try this again.
There we go.
Okay. Technologies, right? Okay, so are you seeing the screen?
Yeah.
And are you seeing a full screen of this image?
Nope. Just
Okay. You're not seeing the image when I go full screen? Is that what's happening?
Yeah. So just show us your presentation in
All right. So let me try this if it's possible. Okay. All right. So I guess I'll play it using this method. All right. So this is an image of Dr. Rotwang, which is a kind of epitomizes the
Dimitri,
what's happening?
we're still not seeing it. There we go. Now we see it.
Are you seeing it again, or?
We see it now. Yep. This is good.
Okay. All right. So this is an image of Dr. Rotwang. It's a central character from a Fritz Lang's classic film Metropolis. It epitomizes the mad scientist that at one time in history is sort of a pivotal figure in contemporary society that says limitation is possibility is limitless, and way to innovate and way to design anything that's moonshot ideas is only limited by imagination. And I think I love this image because it epitomizes what we like to do at the X Lab. That is moonshot ideas, that we're not limited by our capacity or productive capabilities, but we're only limited by imaginations. And so with that in mind, of course, I sort of mirror some of the past figures that kind of parallels this idea about unlimited imaginative capabilities of individual. In this case, two geniuses and polymaths who went beyond their capabilities of typical practitioners and thinkers and philosophers. On the left is the English mathematician, polymath, and of course, at his time, was a magician, Dr. John Dee. He's, by the way, is the author of the preface to all the mathematic books that everybody reads, all the high school students read from grades 8 to 12. And of course, on the right is the legendary Nikola Tesla, which I think we are respecting his work a lot more because we're discovering his legacy of his creation. So this is what our lab models as a sort of a philosophical context towards what we would like to achieve as an idealistic view of what we do here at X Lab. So on a lighter note, I would like to start with this quote. It's not my quote, but it's actually a very discrete quote from a movie that I'm sure many of you have seen, which is the Dark Knight by Christopher Nolan. The term refers to, and again, within the art practice and something that's very familiar to by other architects. Do I look like I have a plan? It's referring to the fact that as an architect we work with a plan. So it's not referring to obviously that there is a sort of a master plan involved, but we just simply at the office at our capacity, we don't work with a traditional plan. So that's what it really means. Do I look like I have a plan? Means we don't work with a plan. We work with design and ideas. So I would like to start with one of our latest project that's engaged in, and we'll sort of work down from there. So recently we've been kind of been interested at esoteric ideas and proportion. So going back to sort of early sort of fundamental principles on geometries. So we've been deeply exploring the ideas of proportions, classical proportions, and golden geometry, such as the golden ratios. And we were looking at deeper and how these proportions can inform the contemporary space. I sort of given myself a challenge to see if we can design a comfortable and in fact a very practical space within a very limited limited range of space that we have. In this case, a 27 feet by 27 foot square footprint for a single person domicile. So I'm sorry, there's some things on my head right now. So as you can see from the proportional arrangements that was made on this particular floor plan drawings, we begin with a little bit more easier proportion to deal with, which is the proportions of 3. And the idea was that we can fit all the space or the spatial requirements we need for a particular domicile. And of course, we got much deeper into the esoteric philosophy and some of the more deeper spiritual geometry. Of course, that relates indirectly to how the play of domesticity plays out in the actual space. And again, all of these were, it wasn't just simply penned in, but we needed to make sure that the proportion works with near perfect range within the 27 foot by 27 footprint. And of course, here's the floor plan. So once again, many people thought the 27 feet by the 27 feet house would be extremely small and tight. But as you can see, it's quite generous. We have the kitchen here, the single bedroom, bath, and of course the living room. And we started kind of a simple stripped down a wall party, interior partition party, the window scheme, and of course the roof scheme, which is these are all made from precast concrete. And here's some initial renders. Again, what it seems to be a limited range of space, but using the proportion that we derive from classical knowledge, there's a range of possibilities that we have previously unexplored. So again, one of many things that we do in the lab because we're curious about what that particular set of ideas can take us. I think this is the only exterior views or elevation we did. The point wasn't to actually plot this down into an actual site, so we just had to kind of put something in there. So the next one is a landscape project or product project. We were developing some ideas with a fellow incubator of ours who's working on the Plus Pool. If you guys don't know what that is, you should look up a colleague of ours who's no longer around because they group separated and divorced, called Family. They have proposed the idea for a on the water Brooklyn River swimming pool that you can swim in, that uses the actual river water to swim in, but it filters the water so everybody can enjoy the water that is available in New York but nobody swims in. So I had this sort of equivalent idea because again I've been to a lot of wonderful places, including this is an image of the Munich English Garden, of course, at the Central Park. These are all the kind of amenities that many urbanites enjoy, but believe it or not, we do have access problems in any different cities. So the idea was for this project was, what if we can bring the access to the quintessential elements of the landscape and exterior into interior, and perhaps even limited range exterior space that the people living in the cities have. And to do that, I stripped the elements of outdoor space into 4 principal elements: the floor, ground, the flora and fauna, the rock beds, and of course the water. And basically putting all 4 of those elements into a slot, and this was the kind of the idea, and we went forward with it. The design portion, unfortunately you can't see it because we're not on full screen. I'm sorry, there's an animation of how these arrangements of designs were made. Design portions was made so that each block is not just simply a rectangular block that fits rigidly, but rather a very flexible block that can produce a very customizable surface that you can arrange and rearrange so that each individual users can make the landscape that fits their personal needs. So here's a block arrangement that uses a seating space. Here's a block arrangement that uses, in particular, the way the ground landscapes are focused. Here's one that focuses on water, and here's one that focuses particularly on the fauna and fauna. And the idea is, again, they all come together, again, customizable, and each individual elements that really makes up what a park is. And again, not just simply a grass bed or a rock, but all the elements that we are accustomed to see and feel and smell in a park. So we began to start making prototypes like we always do in the lab. We also explored using more cutting edge and sustainable materials. In this case, it's blocks made from mushroom fungus. Here's one particular prototype. Again, this is about 10 feet by 10 feet space. Pardon me, 20 feet by 20 feet space. And this is what a particular sections of the park would look like when it comes together. And the idea was that it can expand into many other footprint and territory, but it can work as little as a footprint of 20 by 20 space. Here's a desktop version of the prototype, so pheasants and so forth. So this was presented as a demo day or a demo product at the GSAP incubator where I work. So the last project I'm going to present is a speculative and applied research, meaning that there is a scientific and engineered research that is involved, and it isn't merely a design solution, but rather an engineered solution that can have an applicable product. So what inspired us for this project, like many project, there's an inspiration behind it. Again, I'm as you can see, I'm kind of getting into very deeply spiritual mode. This quote is from by Diaz preacher that I recently saw recently on a lecture. He mentions that the following quote: "The smallest amount of light can illuminate the darkest of rooms, but no amount of darkness can extinguish the smallest amount of light," which I think is very poetic, saying that. And if you're a spiritual person, it says that there's a divine nature in everything that's made in the world. So again, it gets into a sort of interesting territory of both speculation and applied science. We were given one particular sector of territory to give a design demonstration of a very long research project on camouflage and pattern imprints that we did at the office. So this is a kind of a basement square space that we were given. Again, very tight space, but we had this kind of a long, elongated surface to work with. And the idea is that we create a surface that can absorb light. Again, all organically. There's no electricity or other type of power components involved. Everything is derived from really the science of how the pigments and lights are absorbed through the eyes. So I wish you can look at this in full screen. So what you're looking at is basically a photograph that's been translated. It's a photograph of a sunlight translated into our proprietary algorithm that extrapolates the image this way. So that the idea is if we shine a light around the lighter area, the light side of the area will actually expand onto the darker area. And when you take the lights away, and then the darker area will actually creep into the light area, which kind of, it's not magic, but it's just kind of a both visual and pigment effect. So here's a demonstration of the visitors working, testing or giving demoing for themselves what the effect of the light on the printed patterns. So I would play this video. Hopefully you can see it. So keep an eye on this dark area right now. Again, this isn't a computer screen. It's, as you can see, the darker area moves and expands. And if you look at the light area and in the dark area, it gets shaded out. So again, it was shot with my iPhone, but you can kind of sort of get the idea. So again, the idea is it's a type of pattern that allows for light and shadow to perform. Here's much more. We did a more enclosed study at our lab, so we can see it much more at a kind of a enclosed environment. So again, it's not a computer effect or screen. What you're looking at is basically lights being beamed across the pattern surface. So again, this is not a video or a trick. It's just merely light streaking across the light patterns at a different wavelength of light or intensity. So again, not all of our project is purely speculative. There's a number of applied application for this, including built materials, patterns for camouflage, fashion, obviously, and a number of both fashionable and applicable applications that we were able to explore within the collaborative element environment in GSAP Incubator. So these are some of our partners who partner with us for this particular project. But I would like to sort of end it there, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Dimitri. We appreciate your thoughts, and we're sorry about the glitch slideshow presentation. I'm sure that the images would have been much more compelling if you could have seen the full screen. Unfortunately, that's one of the issues with the live stream.
It is no problem. Thank you.
Next, we're going to move on to Jessica Ray Ecker. I'd like to read a short biography of hers. In the School of Design and particularly within the School of Architecture here at Wenzhou-Kean University, we wanted to welcome all of you back in kind of a larger setting. So that's why we're having this symposium, is kind of the welcome back opportunity. So we're grateful that all of you are back with us here this semester, and we hope that you find this symposium inspiring as you move into your own work this semester. You're able to take away some of the ideas and some of the creative process implementation that these practitioners are implementing, and we hope it's useful for you. Jessica Ray Ecker grew up in the American Southwest, which is very exotic to this location, and of course the same is true in the other direction. Exposed to desert landscapes and modern architecture. Her father, a civil engineer, took her on tours of jails and prisons in her youth. This exposure to vast landscapes and confronting dwellings continues to shape her artistic career. She is intrigued by the contradiction of being in the place, yet not being in the place. That there, always a separation between structure and freedom. Graduating in 2012 with her MFA in painting and drawing, Jessica claimed residency in Arizona. However, it's currently teaching art in China.
Neat. I need this one. It's fine. Yeah, it's fine. I can stand for the first part, if that's okay. Ni hao. How is everyone this afternoon? Good? Good. Okay. All right. So I'm a painter. So if you're in architecture, this might be a little bit different, but at the same time, there are a lot of overlaps, especially in my work. I need a little light, so I agree. Thank you. Then you can either read and then we can turn it off. Is that good? Okay. All right. So first, I guess I'm going to read a little bit, and then we'll have more of the presentation and look at some slides. So we are professional observers. Our job is to tell the world the story we see as we see it, as we want to see it, or even as we don't want to see it. When the viewer sees what we see, it is magic, but not predicted, because we all have our own vision based on our own experience. Interpretation will never be exact. Our experience begins when we are born. Our way of observing begins when we are born, and our process begins when we are born. It is true that our processes will have similar or identical components. We start with a blank canvas, a blank canvas, yet our process is intuitive and personal. Like with DNA, we share similar, even identical characteristics with others. But within our DNA, there is also our own unique signature. This is the same for process, and sometimes it takes a while to figure out what our signature looks like and how it functions. It is our duty, through our practice of making, to interpret what our own intuitive process is and how it functions. However, similar to hair, color, skin tightness, height, etc., or the expressed traits of DNA, like our artistic process, can change over time. It is therefore also our duty to know our process, yet question our process as we evolve as artists and humans. Once we have an idea what our process is, we can plan for it. We can wake up at a certain time or not. We can make preparatory drawings or not. We can gather research on a subject or not. What we cannot do is think that by planning and knowing our process, we can therefore control our outcome. Once we limit ourselves to a predicted and perfected result, we stop creating. We become mechanics on our assembly line of ideas, rigid and boring. Orson Welles, the great American film director, said, "The director is simply the audience. His job is to preside over accidents." To rephrase, the artist or designer is simply the audience. His, her, or their job is to preside over accidents. Thus, our job as artists is to create an environment where accidents or freedom within creation can be cultivated and embraced. Through our process, we aim for perfection, in the sense that we look at a piece and say, it works. There is life here, and it speaks to those who listen. So what is my experience? I was born and raised for part of my life in the desert of Phoenix, Arizona. This area is surrounded by mountains, yet unlike other mountainous regions, the Phoenix Basin is wide, and one does not feel trapped by the mountains, but enhanced by them, as they grace the edges of the horizon. They were and are a symbol of freedom and ascension to a better place, a different place, one where I'm not scared of the illnesses that plague my mother, or the monster that lurks behind her sadness, and a house that is meant to protect and comfort, yet also traps and isolates. In nature, I can step one foot in front of the other and feel that I am in charge of my being, connected to something more magnificent and significant than my everyday reality. In contrast, as I toured prisons and jails my father built, I recognized the embodiment of my perceptions and feelings of isolation within a physical form, a dwelling. Here I was, always and am still, always desiring to be free of the institutions that hold me or held me, religion, school, society, family, but not knowing how or if I really wanted to escape their secure shelter, or even could. Could the nature I love so much protect and embrace me while offering me freedom? Or is freedom the temptress to lure me into further solitude without the guarantee of security? And then, so that's the kind of the written part, and now we will look at some slides. So, this first slide is kind of to remind us that creativity can be fun. So the picture in the middle is me before an arts show, trying to gear myself up to be excited. And then you'll see other, some of my paintings, and then also some influences that I have. So this is a picture of a cactus from Arizona, Bryce Canyon. This is the Kaufman House in Palm Springs. Another painting I did, me delivering a painting. And this is Carrie Marshall's show at the Broaden, or the MoCA Museum in LA. Okay, so like I said earlier, my first exposure when I was younger to a lot of space and architecture was that my dad built prisons. So this isn't the exact prison that I toured or the jail that I first toured when I was young, but this is very similar to what it looks like. So this is what it looks like in America if you go to prison. So as a kid, so when I say I toured it when I was young, I was probably about 5 or 6. So that's my first exposure, and my dad really liked to take us to the job sites so we could see what he was building, which is kind of similar to here, a lot of concrete, but stark. There's not a lot of life there in these buildings. So this is always in my mind. Prisons, the idea of prisons, the idea of confinement, what happens to a person inside that building. So we contrast that a little bit, but not quite. This is the Eastern State Penitentiary, and this is the photograph that I took. This is in Pennsylvania. The Eastern State Penitentiary is interesting because it is the first prison in America to have solitary confinement. And the reason, what that means is that a person is alone in their cell, right? For the duration of their, while they're in prison. And one reason that they did that was because they thought that the person would feel closer to God. So they designed the prison to be kind of like a cathedral. So if you notice, this right here is arched at the top. And you look down a long hallway towards the light. And you can see it. So this is a typical cell. So the prisoners would sit in these cells by themselves and be looking up to the light. And even the word penitentiary comes from the word penitent. They wanted the people inside the penitentiary to feel penitent about what they did and to, through the process of becoming closer to God, etc. So these pictures I took in grad school, I was touring. So I was kind of like toying with a lot of ideas in grad school. This is one of them. This is another influence for me. So I grew up in Arizona, and there's a lot of great architecture there. This is at the ASU campus, Arizona State University. This is the Image Auditorium designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. Not necessarily what you typically imagine of Frank Lloyd Wright's buildings, but I love this building. It's beautiful. It's one of my favorites. So I got to go there as a kid. Also, Taliesin West. I toured as a young child. This was my dog, Penny. This is us at the Grand Canyon a few years ago. So you can see that I also grew up with this landscape. And I love it so much, the beautiful rock colors. It's interesting because China has a lot of red rock too, right? You see that from the iron deposits. So in some ways, similar landscapes, and of course, in others, completely different because it's the desert. These mountains, I didn't take this picture, so I don't want to take credit for it, but these are the Superstition Mountains that are just outside of Phoenix. I hiked there as a child with my dad. He would take me and my sister there and let my mom rest while she was recovering from sicknesses. And it was a great time to be outside and to be a part of nature. These are the saguaro cactuses, very significant to people in Arizona. They really only grow there in the wild. So also at grad school, another idea that I toyed with a little bit was the idea of dams. This is a dam in northern Arizona. It's the Glen Canyon Dam. I took this photograph. So the idea, I think, for me, what's interesting with dams is that same idea of a structure, isolating or holding back the potential of the nature or whatever's behind it. So the force that it's withholding, that you're never really sure what that force could lead to. And the friction between those two is something that's interesting to me. So I did a series of dams. Here's one of the paintings I did of that dam in graduate school. So this is oil. So we're going to start seeing some of my work now. So the series that we'll talk about more is kind of like what this led up to. They're called architected landscapes. And we're going to see a few of them in the slide presentation, but if you'd like to look at more, they're on my website, which is just my name, jessicariader.com. So feel free to look there. And I'm really bad. I don't have all the titles memorized. I will try to remember them for you. And I remember like kind of the size. So I will try to give that information. Anyway, so another picture of a Kaufman house in Palm Springs. This was taken by Julius Schulman. So part of my research process, my creative process, is just to gather things that I like. Look at things that I like, right? It's very intuitive. I love modern architecture. I love black and white photography. I like Julius Schulman. So of course I'm going to look at his work, and it's going to become an influence for me. So I was going through looking at desert houses. So here's another desert house that I looked at. I'm actually not sure where this is. It's either in Arizona or it's in California, I'm not sure. But I mean, I'll look at books, I'll look at the internet, wherever I find inspiration, I'll look. This is another desert house in Palm Springs. The architects for this, Marnell Ratzener, they make prefabricated houses. So if you're interested in kind of a modern, mid-century modern house that they're making now in prefab architecture, they're a good firm to look at. So I really love this image of this house. So you can see it. So this is a watercolor painting that I made. These I did after graduate school. So my space went from a nice big space where I could make oil paintings to my room. So in my room, I'm working with watercolors. This is about 20 inches by 30. And these are all titled Architected Landscape and a Number. And some of them have titles and some of them don't. So that is a watercolor painting and wash. So this is a painting done as a study off of the prefab house. And to me, with paintings, I don't want them to be exactly what they are, because to me, it's the part of it, it's the emotions, the feeling of being in the space. And I also think that if I paint something exactly as a picture would, then I might as well just take a picture, right? So I want to also create the emotion and the movement between the two and the friction between the two. So you'll see that kind of evolve through my work. This is a smaller painting, also watercolor. This is another study of that house, watercolor painting. These two, this one and the last one I sold as a fundraiser. So sometimes as artists, you can't sell in galleries, so you have little fundraisers, so I sold it as a fundraiser. So this is another study of that house, but bigger and larger. And you can see I'm starting to use my own creative license for the landscape. Okay, so it's kind of referencing the area, but not exactly. Once again, wash about 20 by 30 inches because that's the paper size. So sometimes those are your limitations, paper size. So here's another way that I get inspiration through the creative process. This is my friend. I follow people on Instagram. He posted this picture and I thought, oh, that would make a cool painting. So he posted this and then I did this drawing. And then I made a painting, and this is the first acrylic painting. So you can see it's not the exact thing, but it's inspired by that. It's inspired by the landscape and the desert. Kind of emotions there. You can see up here, we have some streaking. That's because I use a lot of metallics in my painting. Metallics are really interesting. I think maybe you probably do this when you create buildings, but if you use something metallic, right, in the light, it's a different color, and in the darkness, it's a different color. So as you walk around a building, or as you walk around a painting, there's movement within it. It gives it life. So you can see this. This is the same painting. This is the painting with the light shining on it, with a flash. This is the painting with no light, with all the light diffused. So this gold color becomes two different colors. So if you imagine when the light carries over the painting, it creates a movement, an emotion, a feeling associated with the dwelling. So one more place that I really want to talk about in Arizona is Arco Santi. I don't know if any of you have heard of Arco Santi, but the architect is Paul Soleri. He started building this, I think, in the 60s or 70s. It's a community dwelling on a cliff in Arizona. And he is kind of the father of arcology, I guess, correct? Which is the mixture of architecture and ecology. I went to this space again when I was a kid, and then I was going back looking at desert dwellings, desert landscapes, and I came across pictures of it, and I thought, yes, I will paint Arco Santi. So I took these pictures after I already started painting a few of the paintings, which we will look at. So this is Arco Santi 1, painted in 2007. This is 36 by 36 inches. This is Arco Santi 2, which is actually, I didn't have a photo of it, but this is, you can stay here. It's called the Sky View, Sky Suite. This is Arco Santi 2, 2017. Arco Santi 3, 2017. All same size, 36 by 36. Part of that is because I made these in my room, my bedroom, and I had limited space on how big the canvases can be, but they're all painted acrylic on canvas. So I'm trying to like have the landscape become more fluid and abstracted, while keeping the architecture very clean. So there's that juxtaposition. And then I went and visited Arco Santi and came back and did some more research that was about at the time. So now I'm started thinking about what happens when we go to a space, a dwelling, and then when we revisit the space. What's the disconnect between our memory of the space and the actuality of the space? So I wanted to create kind of a little bit of more closed idea of the space. That was maybe a little bit sadder to me. That's what I was trying to do. Anyway, so sometimes in the creative process, we're looking at direct references, and sometimes we're saying what if. So this is a picture, a painting that I did of the Stahl House in LA, but I'm saying, I looked at this picture and saying, what if we turn it? What if there isn't LA? What if it's this? What if, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And for the creative process, I think it's really important that we embrace those what if moments, right? Because those can lead to other opportunities. So I went to Italy this summer, this last summer, and I decided that I wanted to make a painting based on the memory in there, or the images that I looked at. So this is what ended up happening. I created this painting called Cypress Trees in Italy. So as you can see, I didn't actually see this architecture there, but I wanted to think about the memory I had of the place and see what that would create. And then this painting is actually a diptych. So each of these panels are 30 by 40 inches. So when they're together with the space in between, they're about 30 or 62 inches by 40. So with this, it's again that idea of what is our memory of the space, and then what happens when we go back to it. Do we feel the same things? So even these two panels, I painted them, the backgrounds, one was painted white, one was painted gray. As you think about like a memory being gray, or maybe a different emotion when you revisit the space. And then so they're kind of supposed to be a mirror of each other. That was the idea, or the intent anyway. And then lastly, more recently I've been looking into churches. I used to be a really religious person, so I think churches are really interesting for a number of reasons. One, connecting back to the idea of penitence and the jails, and how those things are really connected. But also I think because nature can be a really spiritual place. Yet sometimes when we're in a church, we're very isolated from our surroundings. So this church is in Germany, and St. Martin's Church in Germany, and it was redesigned by John Paulson a few years ago. So he ended up like just making everything completely white on the inside, and he actually took pieces of stone and shaped them really thinly and covered the windows so you can have this diffused light, which I think is really great. So if you guys want to look into it, it's a pretty great remodel. So then I took that idea, but then I thought, but what if we could see the beautiful mountains that are around Germany while also being a church? So that is kind of the interpretation that I made of it, of that building. And that's the last painting that I made while I was in America. So anyway, in conclusion, I think that now, once I've made the work, then I like to look back and say, okay, so this is what it is. Now I can talk about it. Now I can have an artist statement. Let me just read this. Once we have created the work, then we can look back and say what it is. If we define it before it is made, we don't allow for what ifs or accidents. We become the assembly line. Yeah, how many time? Good group? Okay. So if it's okay, I'm just going to read my artist statement. So now that we've looked at the work, then is when usually, especially painters, have artist statements. So what is a dwelling but an empty vessel to protect from the surrounding elements, while conversely providing an anchor which holds its inhabitants within those elements. This necessary irony is an essential part of human existence. Yet when one envisions the relationship with habitat and habitation, is it rooted in reality or an illusion of symbiosis? Is there an underlying combative friction within the dualism, or are both elements pulling away for an act of it? So that's my work. Thank you for.
Wow, Jessica, that was very compelling. I appreciate that. I hope all of you took note of the work and some of the things that you talked about, particularly that idea of becoming a slave to the process. You mentioned, maybe we can look at that closer. Very compelling discussion. Now we're going to go to Will Wei, who is a native of Beijing and based in New Haven, Connecticut. He's a designer at Telearchitects, where he and I are colleagues. He is a key member of the internal research and development platform called REACH, which is focused on computation and emerging technologies. After completing a professional architectural degree at Rice University, he went on to finish a Master's of Science at the University of Michigan, with emphasis in computer science, computer programming, and architecture. He often brings novel BIM practice, parametric solutions, and advanced workflows to project teams. Currently, he's developing an in-house digital toolkit with integrated information modeling into traditional modeling workflows. So, go ahead.
Thanks, Spencer, for that introduction. So my talk will be more technical in comparison to Jessica's presentation. I'll try to keep everybody away. I think it will be relatively short. So thank you all for having me here to share my story. I hope you all had a wonderful new year. It's an exciting time. It's a new year, new semester, and new opportunities. It's also exciting because the industry of architectural practice is going through a tremendous technological shift. That technology is information modeling. Information modeling isn't a particular design philosophy, but process in the making of design. If I were to summarize it in very concise terms, right now, I'd tell you that it is the integration of metadata with building forms. You've probably heard of BIM, building information modeling. The core concept of that can be applicable to beyond singular buildings. So although building information modeling is a simple concept, I think it isn't taught at architecture schools with a level of clarity and purpose as it should be. It took me some time to realize its importance. So like Spencer introduced, I went to Rice University in Houston, where the school highly concentrated on or focused on theory and to a degree polemics in architecture. Not until my grad school at University of Michigan was I really exposed to information or technology affiliated with information modeling. Afterwards, an opportunity emerged at Telearchitects in New Haven, where Yale University is. The company was looking for fresh ideas and specialties for an office that is 40 years old. So a special platform was formed. It was called REACH, which actually has been my main gig at work. Among other things, we research the potential of computation, parametric modeling, optimization, and even simulation in our practice. The topic of information modeling therefore became highlighted because all these buzzwords in architecture are all integral to information modeling. So the design process has traditionally been very inefficient, in my opinion. The architect pushes for many deadlines, and for each of them, the architect delivers the instrument of service, namely the drawing set. These deliverables are often end products. They're immutable and discrete sets of information without any communication with each other. So with the help of computer-aided drafting, we've been able to increase the speed of production, yet we are repeating the same steps over and over for each of those milestones. So what information modeling enables us is having the designer directly model design intents in one place. This model will be enough to output deliverables upon request. Of course, less resolved model will output less information, but as the project progresses, the model becomes more and more articulate and the output more and more detailed. It might strike a chord with some of you Revit users. If you Revit, the information modeling process is what precisely drove the development of that piece of software. Like I said earlier, the concept is fairly simple for information modeling. You need to somehow marry the geometries of the design with the metadata that it should contain. The more challenging part is how you go about setting that up. Revit is a version of this marriage, and it relies heavily on the assumptions of the building industry. In effect, a designer may seem to be forced into making decisions on what certain elements of the building will be in the built form prematurely. That's why a lot of the users, architects, tend to have such big trouble using Revit. So some of the projects undertaken by Reach and CPA take aim at changing that. We want to customize how our designers may interact with the digital models they create and not be limited by the provisions of any particular software. I can show you a couple of examples. The first one is called Reach Tower. Essentially, it is turning a well-beloved software, Rhino, into a Revit-like interface. PCDA does a lot of super faults, and we are concerned often by a set of parameters that are either not included in popular architect software or perhaps too expensive in a suite of engineering tools for the office to appear. For example, consider a curtain wall panel to work it as one of these metadata, which incidentally can be queried dynamically because it is computed by an algorithm. Rather than handcrafting a report on panel warpage of all 800 or 1,000 panels each time the scheme changes, we can integrate that process into the interface. So it's a standardized and rapid procedure, and a designer can cruise through that process. Here I can play an internal promotion clip of that plugin, if you will. It showcases some of the, sorry, you muted. Okay. It showcases briefly some of the main functions that I was mentioning. So what we've seen here is managing level information, especially when you're making high-rise buildings. This is analogous to level in Revit. This is a prototype of managing shaft openings for floors, high-rise floors. Also, you can do programmatic area tally on the fly. The left is sort of the interface that we have to custom build. The thing about Rhino is it's in the bigger picture, it's a really open software for customization. What we've seen here is really close to home for us because we do a lot of custom wall designs. And as I said, warpage and deformation is something that we watch out for. And we made this tool so we can kind of keep an eye on those early on in the design process. These gadgets to help designers keep track of those attributes. And of course, environmental impact or the effects of the environment on the building is something that we consider constantly. This is trying to give a designer a handy tool to look at how sun patterns affect the shadows on surrounding buildings, and the effect of solar exposure. So all of these tools, this is another one related to sun, is trying to get a solar glare at a particular point. And then there's also a suite of utilities that help you really expedite your design process as well as documentation. Right now on screen is a quick fast tool. A lot of these are still under development, but within the next 6 months or so, it will be more articulate and more fully baked. This is a quick parking layout. But I'm going to show you another example, which is called Reach Campus. This toolkit is an experiment to synthesize institutional planning into singular yet dynamic user interface. Compared to designing buildings, planning involves much more static data. By that, I mean spreadsheets, numbers, records, so on and so forth. The largest merit of Reach Campus is that it establishes real-time linkage to the back-end data from the virtual model. Some metrics are similar to Reach Tower, where we can query geometries and infer from their attributes. Others, such as energy consumption or campus vegetation statuses, must be visualized from textual or numeric sources. Reach Campus plays the middleman and uses the proto-database practices to expedite cross-references in concrete forms in your digital model and abstract data. You will see some of those functions in this video that we made of it. Let me try to. I want to scroll forward a little bit so we're not watching the 16 minutes of footage. The thing that what you're seeing on the right is really a campus in the United States, and the model by itself doesn't contain metadata of each building. We have to set up that and show this query mechanism so the designer can, with a click of the mouse, access all the metadata and description of those buildings. Because of the metadata is associated with geometric information, you can do a series of analysis. For example, distance-based analyses, which I think the video is about to show. This is kind of highlighting proximity of, say, bus stops or color coding the building, going to distance to things that really people care about, like campus parking. So with these kind of information, you can always, we've been able to do this since a very long time ago, but it's very rare that the designer has the tools to put everything together. Right now it's showing like trees within the investigation area. You can see the metadata is accumulated through almost like a reality capture. So people log information of each tree in their database, and in the digital model it's located. Right now I'm showing the Google 3D or Google Street View just to show that it has that kind of one-to-one relationship. So the designer is operating kind of a virtual reality, although VR means totally different things, but quite literally. The other things such as heat mapping, it's also distance oriented. So views, that was a term that we coined. We call it viewability. It was just a flash, but I'll go back again. That is a way of dynamically showing kind of side corridors and view corridors for campus buildings, because when you're an institutional planner, those kind of things really matter quite a bit. Things like the building's iconic quality, or like how it's visible from the distance. So I can go on and on to show you more of what we have done, but I thought I would actually use the last couple of minutes and offer a few words of advice from a practitioner's standpoint. So I encourage you to really reflect on the process, especially when you want to become an architect, architectural designer. Try to find areas of improvement. More and more industries are tapping into the potential of information technology and computation. It would be foolish for us, the rising generation of architects, to ignore the disciplinary disruption big data can cause. Since I've bidden farewell to schools a while ago, I have found the greatest use of information modeling in practice. However, so in practice, it is an ongoing evolution for service-oriented businesses. But in academia, it is an advanced topic. It often requires curatorial planning before it becomes part of the regular curriculum. But I think data-driven processes and information-driven processes will very soon start to qualify the kind of design work you do in a subjective profession like ours, especially when digital means are already deeply embedded in it. So I hope you seek out resources and understand the ways of information modeling as well as its application in the design process. In the very end, it is in service to the architect's creative works. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. We appreciate those thoughtful comments. Picking your brain about that. Great job. Next, we'll have Rachel Stingler here talking, and she's a woman feminist theologian and poet. She won the 2017 Associates of Women Letters Poetry Award for her book Mother's Milk, Poems in Search of the Heavenly Mother, published by Press and Comedy Press. It has another volume, name, a set for you in 2019. She co-edited Oxford University Press's Moral Feminism, Essential Writings, alongside Joanna Brooks and Hannah Wilwright. Let's see what finish her PhD in philosophy, religion, and theology at Claremont in Los Angeles, and has a BA in philosophy from Brigham Young University and an MS in library and information sciences from Simmons College. And let me just point out that Rachel has several best-selling books out, published, and she's a published and is continuing down poetry, she writes about philosophers such as Soren Kierkegaard I think she has a lot to teach us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Spencer. So when Jessica spoke, she mentioned that as a painter and a drawer, her work was different than some of the other works, especially for a room full of architects. Mine is different still because I'm not a visual artist, but poetry is one form of art. Presentations are also new to me, so this is the first time I've done one in a long time. I wanted to start even just by talking about how I became a poet, because it's not my background, it's not what I studied, it's not what I did. Spencer mentioned that my background is in philosophy and theology as well as library science, but I ended up using all of those things together for the poetry that I do, as well as the stage of life I'm at right now, which is mostly being a mother. So I'll continue. So these first slides, you don't have to read them, I'll talk just a little bit about them. I became a poet by accident. There were a few of my friends that started a contest that was an art and poetry contest about thinking about the idea of God as a woman or God as a mother or divine feminine. And I was really interested in this topic and this idea, and I wanted their contest to succeed, but I wasn't a poet and I wasn't a visual artist. So I didn't feel like I could contribute to it. But I did want to be sort of the Socrates midwife to help give birth to other people's poetry and other people's art. So I wrote every single poet I knew and asked them to submit something and asked them if they were submitting something. And I just saw these emails on Facebook a while ago to look back at this time, where I wrote my friend Elizabeth and I said, "Dear Elizabeth, are you submitting something to this contest?" And she writes me back and says, "I have a poem I could possibly submit, but I might submit it to something else." But then what she says next changed everything. It's so simple, but she just said, "Are you going to submit something?" And as soon as I read it, I just thought like, no. But then I kept thinking about it. And so while I wasn't a poet, I was a writer. I had been blogging, I had a website for 5 years, mostly personal essays. And so I was used to writing. It was something important to me, as well as academic writing, work that I did for my school and for conferences. But I had never written a poem before. But because of Elizabeth's simple question and encouragement, I did decide to try. And so I wrote her and I said, "I'm thinking of trying very hard to be just this once." I said, "I'm not really a poet." But then I just said, more than that, I listed all the poets and artists I love in here. And then she just said the phrase prose poems that also became important to me. And absolutely a say, if you try, I'd love to see what you will do. And so again, those words really stuck with me, and I just thought about them and thought about them. So part of what I want to say is to them, like there's so much that's important about mentors, like getting help for people that are at levels above us, but I think there's also something to say about getting encouragement and help from people that are on our same level, from our friends and from each other and our classmates. So I did determine to write one thing, and then I sent her to try. I was living in Brooklyn, New York at the time. Spencer and I, he's my husband, for those who don't know, we just had a baby. I gave birth to Cora at home with midwife. And we were on a train one day, and Spencer offered her a bottle and she didn't take it. And so I was thinking about this like very tiny experience we had and thinking of it to my mother, and something that I read in a newspaper article about how babies are more likely to take a bottle if they're taking it from their mom, which is an interesting detail about babies and their mothers. But so I just thought about this experience that I had and thinking about something bigger. And then my friend said really nice words. And so I wrote down while I was walking. I tapped to a friend's house, I tapped it on my phone, and that day I came home and I typed it on my computer. And I just wrote those 2 paragraphs. I didn't actually know how to write a poem. And then that night I actually ended up going to sleep, having a literal dream where I was standing at a pulpit reading 5 poems. And I woke up, probably because I was waking up crying in the night, and then I wrote that. It came really easily and quickly. And then so I wrote a friend back and I said, "Would you be willing to do some more for me? And perhaps to tell me which you like more, like which might work with among those poems and how." So basically I just like asked this friend questions, and she so gently and so nicely answered them. She said, "Happily, you can mention a free verse by just creating line groupings that it explains." She read through the ones that I sent her, and she said, "Sometimes I just play around, sometimes you shape, sometimes punctuation, sometimes thoughts, or rhythm of speech." And then she gave me a suggestion and showed me a poem where there's lots of little tiny poems together. So she suggested a group them in that way. So I ended up sending the 5 poems that I thought were the best I'd written to the contest, even though my goal was just to have 1. I ended up getting honorable mention and $50, which is not so much money, but it was encouraging enough to keep writing. And partly I just couldn't stop as well. But because I was writing more and more poems, from that first poem I decided to try, I decided that I probably should read books about how to write poems because it was so new to me. The first one I read was called The Poet's Companion, and it was a really lovely and encouraging book, as well as including the chapter that was the most useful to me in how to do the line breaks, because that was what I didn't know. I knew how to write, but I didn't know how to do a poem or how to actually feel or be a poem. And one of the things that I loved the best was how soft it was, that it said there's no rules of how to do this, but they just have different effects. And that was really helpful and encouraging for me. And it said some poets like to have their strongest, most emphatic words at the end of a line, and some like to start their lines with the strongest words. And it said there's not a right way or a wrong way to do it, it just will have a different feel. And so playing around with the feeling, and then even being able to look at my poems and see the pattern and notice that most of my poems did it with a stronger word. It would start with a softer word. That was smaller, like an and or the. And then the second I read was a book by a poet herself, one of my favorite poets, Mary Oliver, who actually just passed away a week or two ago. It felt like a great loss to me and many of my friends. And her book was so helpful to read, but it also was scary because her poetry is so good that I thought I would never write poems like her. And the truth is I won't. I'm not her. The experiences that I have are different. And so some of it is recognizing that when you look at your work and make examples, to just be okay that the work we do will be different from the work of the architects that we may admire or see. And the world has these architects already, but they don't have it. And so it's important to offer what we can offer and the ideas and experiences that we have. And one of the other things I did, aside from reading books about how to write poetry, is I read a lot of poetry, both before my first book came out with poetry, as well as the second book that's coming out in April. So I read books by Mary Oliver, which I don't actually have pictures of here. I also wanted to read books by a lot of different types of people. And a lot of them are by women, but a lot of them are by women of color. So one is a Black woman, one is a Hispanic woman, one is a woman from India, etc. It was important to me to get different perspectives and different voices, and even to see different styles of how people wrote, as well as different themes and topics. And these are all books that I read after the first book, but while I was writing my second poetry book. And none of these are poetry, and 3 of them are by the same author, because they're very beautiful. They take Greek mythology and then they kind of make it new. And so it sort of feels like poetry, and it has like really sparse writing that I love. But it's important to be inspired by many things, like rather than just, like even painters, like Jessica didn't just look at paintings to get inspired for her. She looked at architecture, she looked at nature. So it's important for me to look at words, but not just poetry words. And I also try to listen to poets. This is a picture of me and my daughter, Cora. I happen to be really, really lucky. I was on Facebook when I was visiting my parents in Utah this fall. Well, Spencer was actually in New Jersey teaching at CANY there. But we were waiting for a visa and had no idea how long it would take. But I checked a notification from my friend on Facebook, and it said that the next day, the U.S. Poet Laureate, it's like the main poet in all of America, was speaking at the college in my parents' town. And so I brought my daughter, and we went to it. Her name is Tracy Basement. And on the right, we have, I just like screenshotted some of the notes I took from that day, and I really love the part of the beginning that Tracy said she felt freedom when she realized she could ask questions in her poems. And could write poems about the things that felt urgent to her. And she said, if your poems can surprise or scare you, that's good. Rather than only writing one, that's not good. And it actually reminds me of the book, I Live by All I Believe, that she said that people expect her to make pretty buildings, but she said she didn't want to make pretty buildings. Like she wanted to make buildings that made people feel either if I was like safe or comfortable or inspired or enlightened. But she wasn't really interested in pretty. And so I love that Tracy said, like, it's okay to write something that surprises you, and it's just a question that you might not have an answer for. And so Jessica talked about in the process too, you can know your process, so you won't always know the outcome. And it's okay if the outcome surprises you. And then the part that I took the most out of all of Tracy's speech was what she said next. She said, we are all in need of what poetry does, and what poetry does is stop time. It slows down, and she called it a means of survival. And she also talked about how poems are so small that you can read one at breakfast and it changes your whole day, that it's something you can do on purpose, but So the idea is like poetry being slow and asking us to be slow and to pay attention and to pause feels so important to me. And I also love in Jessica's speech how she began, like we're professional observers and that there's magic when the viewer views what we see. And that doesn't always happen. We might see new things too, but we can open this window to them. And part of how we open the window is by pausing and noticing something that is. So in architecture, this might look like noticing really simple things that are also big, small and big at the same time, like the shape of something, or the proportion, or the size, or the line, or the color, or just how this space makes you feel. And in poetry, it's just like looking at very tiny things and then writing about them. And it also, I didn't always, I like got so lucky that I got to hear the US poet laureate in person, but I can't see every poet I want to hear in person. And this is another one that I really love. She gave a TED Talk. I don't know for sure if this will work, but it's a 3-minute clip and I'm gonna try it. I would go to them when I could. This is one of the poems that I read by Mary Oliver, who I mentioned, but I also read a book by her about how to write poems. This is called The Loss, because one of the things that the poet laureate talked about was noticing, and Mary Oliver teaches us how to notice everything, but especially nature. She said, there's a kind of white moth, I don't know what kind, that glimmers by midday in the forest, just as the pink moccasin flowers are rising. If you notice anything, it leads you to notice more and more. And anyway, I was so full of energy. I was always running around looking at this and that. If I stopped, the pain was unbearable. If I stopped and thought, maybe the world can't be saved, the pain was unbearable. Another poet I love, Maggie Smith, teaches us to notice motherhood, children, the relationships of the learning that happens between them as well as nature. First of all, I'm your guide here. In the evening dark morning streets, I point and name. Look, the sycamores, their model of paint by number bark. Look, the leaves rusting and crisping at the edges. I walk through Schiller Park with you on my chest. Stars smolder well in the daylight. Look, the pond, the ducks, the dogs paddling after their prize sticks. Fall is when the only acquaintances you know because I've named them begin to end. Soon I'll have another season to offer you. Frost soft on the window and a portal side there, ice leaving the bare gray branches. The first time you see somebody die, you won't know it might come back. I'm desperate for you to love the world because I brought you here. So here, of course, she's talking about a child that she's carrying on her chest, and she's pointing things out to them and giving names. The next is by a poet, Wenzhou-Kean University. She has two books that are published, and both of them are kind of like this. They're pretty little poems, and they often have pretty simple line drawings with them that she did herself. This one called Pretty. I want to apologize to all the women I have called pretty before I've called them intelligent or brave. I'm sorry I made it sound as if something as simple as what you're born with is the most you have to be proud of. When your spirit has crushed mountains, from now on I will say things like you are resilient or you are extraordinary. Not because I don't think you're pretty, but because you are so much more than that. On the left is the first book that I published, not the first book I published, but the first book of poetry that I published that won the award. And on the second is another book that's on the same thing, but edited by some other people, and they chose to include the first set of 5 poems I ever wrote on the subject. And so my desire to try one poem ended up looking like 100. And I sent it out to lots of friends, and I said, which ones do you look best, which ones look pretty best? And then in the first book, I published 242 small poems together. And I also really loved when Jessica's book, she said so much of her process is sort of researching, but also gathering things that she loves together, and then kind of reflecting on them and thinking on them and thinking about the memories that they gave her and the feeling that they gave her and making them her own. And so taking parts of it and adding these perspectives of these, like adding nature where there wasn't before, like in the white church at the end that she had in the And so one of the things that I gathered and added together, even in my own book, is this quote by my favorite philosopher, Soren Kierkegaard. Says, when a child is to be weaned, the mother too is not without sorrow, because she and the child are more and more to be separated. Because the child who first lay under her heart and later rested upon her breast will never again be so close. So they grieve together to grieve sorrow. How fortunate the one who kept the child so close and did not need to grieve anymore. And it's also directly related to my first poem of the book, which was the first poem that I wrote at all, that I wrote while walking into your friend's house, that looked like 2 paragraphs, that didn't have line breaks. And the heart of the poem is the same, as well as many of the lines and many of the words, but it's also sparse, that it's cleaner, the structure's changed, I took words out, and it became a better poem. And I'll read it now in its final version. With motherless milk, I searched for my mother the way baby roots for her mother's breast, head nuzzling from side to side, Mouth open, but I suckle. I was still thirsty. And my belly grew, and my breasts grew, and a ravenous little thing came out. I offered her my milk without money, without price. My husband offered it to her once, while I sat beside him on the train. She pressed her lips against a false nipple and stared at me with sad eyes. I wondered then if Heavenly Mother walked into another room, so we would take the bottle. I wondered then if we are weaning. And the picture that accompanies this poem was by one of my close friends that I went to undergraduate school with, and it was Ashley May Boylan. And the desire that I had to have drawings accompany my poem is because of the one that we saw above by Ruby Kaur. But I really love words, and that's what I'm better at, but I also really do love visual, and I love the way that they work together to make something stronger. And even like when I wrote including friends' work, I always love the artist statements, and they give me so much more insight into the work itself. This is just another example of some of my poems, both looking at women and mothers, but also looking at nature and thinking of how they connect or what they can teach us about each other. So this one is called Julie. If we cut her open, we could count her rings and know her age. But we'd also learn her hunger. Here she put her roots down deep and threw arms to the sky, and how she carried them with grace. And the next one, the title comes from a book I read a long time ago called I Dreamed My Father Was God. And so I just stole the title basically, but changed it to Mother. She had cool eyes and hair as wild as mine, a face lined with wisdom and laughter, a heart heavy as gold. And here we have Mary Oliver's most famous poem, paired with one that I was inspired by, that's, as you see, much briefer and more succinct. It's a lot simpler in style. And so we'll talk about that after I read her poem and then look at mine. So Mary's poem says, you do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about the spirit yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. And in my own try, like kind of an own rewrite or making it my own, just called Wild Flock. We are for Wild Flock who does not have to be good, but instead who has to love and love and love and trust that even in our listening in time of despair and loneliness, we belong to her. And here, like another one of the things that I do, so I try to gather things that I love from everywhere, is just look at really little things. So I was thinking about these flowers. They're really simple. They're often put in bouquets because they're cheap. Like they don't cost so much money, and so oftentimes they're kind of like a filler flower that's included in a bouquet to help flesh out the bouquet. It's called baby's breath. So it's thinking about like if this is what baby's breath is, what would mother's breath be? So baby's breath is delicate white flowers fluttering in a bunch. Mama's breath is tulips, peonies, ranunculus, sycamore, elm, pine mountains. And then the first on the left side is a drawing that my friend Matt Page did that I saw on his Facebook page. And he had a whole series of these. And the title was Hidden Mother. And then I think he had a post about how this was a real thing, that when photography was pretty new, that there was this phenomenon where, and it's even a funny thing because as a mother, like this still happens now. But a lot of times if you see people snapping pictures, like it's really hard to get a picture of everyone looking normal or smiling because they just want to wiggle and yawn. And so here in these pictures where they wanted just the kids, the mother would sit there and almost act as a chair and would have a curtain or a bed sheet over her. And so I could Google this and see this. So in the middle picture, you see a real example of these hidden mothers, where there's a woman under that thing. So it kind of looks like a couple holding the children. And so I was inspired by both this real phenomenon as well as my friend's picture. So hidden mother. Sepia Prince hints at infant sons, daughters, held by hidden hands, hidden mouths, and mothers, covered, curtained, veiled, but there. And then this next one was inspired just by conversations that I had with two different women. The first one I wanted to think of a grandmother, but like the smartest grandmother you could ever imagine. the woman in the real woman, her name is Laurel Thatcher-Orr, and she has a Pulitzer Prize in literature, and she just retired from Harvard. She taught history for many years. But she was saying that like family history charts, that they often look really patriarchal in structure. So I was trying to think of what a matriarchal family history chart would look like. And I thought about Russian dolls, and there's like a mother or a doll inside a doll. And then this is sort of what it's like biologically. And then another friend talked about this thing here, that like where the record breaks, that we don't always have our full family history chart. So Cora inside Rachel, inside Claudia, inside Nina, inside Allie, inside Sarah, inside Anne, inside Maria, inside Hannah. And then that's where my record breaks. There's just a few more slides. This was inspired by another teacher that I love. The theme on the left is called Finding Mother, and the one on the right is called Mom Trick. So Finding Mother, she's a ladder and a chair and a bed and a pillow and a tightrope walker and a drinking fountain for her children, and more than all of those together in one spring. And then, how many are you familiar with this work? It's by a French artist named Louise, I don't know how to say her last name, but Louise Bourgeois. Maybe from how to say her name? Okay. But I also, my friend is a weaver and an art history major, but she introduced me to this artist, and there's also a children's book I love. But this artist made these giant spiders out of steel, and she called them a mon, and she was mother. And typically this spider mother standing 18 feet tall and steel or flesh, are a pair of things that are broken. The weaver of ribbons on tapestries and glows and stories and stars and songs and words. And then here used to be a picture from the children's book as well. At the very bottom, there's a phrase that's in the poem. A Louise whisper past time and space and home death. But when spiders and mothers lose their homes, when someone breaks it, they don't be mad, they just build again. And then this last one is inspired by a children's movie called Moana, like the very last scene where the goddess of creation Tupi. She has reasons to be mad at this other person named Maui. He stole her heart and kept her from creating for a long time. She says the mother does not always need to talk. Sometimes she just offers gifts, forgiveness with an open palm. And then this might be one of the last picture images. It's just based on the Japanese principle that was really break, that they're actually more beautiful if you show the brokenness. We patch it with gold or with another filling, but you let it stay visible. You don't hide that it broke. So she knows what to do with shattered vessel parts, how to piece them back together carefully and line the cracks with gold. And then these two I won't read, but these are just some that were inspired directly by my children, like lines that they said or things that they did. And so in my work, I just tried to look for the topic that I'm thinking about in all of the places. So everything I watch, everything I read, the words that my children say, and the books and movies that I watch with them. And so I think that it relates to architecture in a way, and like part of it is even just like literally carrying a notebook with me or carrying my phone and being ready to type an idea if I have it. And so for you guys, that might look like carrying a notebook to draw something if you have an idea or if you know. But it's looking at other architects, other themes, as well as paintings and nature and just getting ideas from everywhere. And it's just doing the work. It's creating and creating explorations. And trying again, even sharing it with each other, getting feedback from each other, from your professors, and encouraging each other in your creations. So being willing to try something new. Because I didn't start as a poet, but I became a poet with the help of yeah.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I think your work is compelling and helpful to all of us, so I appreciate you today. Next, we're going to the last presentation from Andrew Carter. He has a BA in International Law and Diplomacy with an emphasis in inter-American relations from Brigham Young University, and a BS and an MS, MA, Master of Architecture from Idaho, from University of Idaho. His professional experience is in building performance and sustainability. Andrew is a founding contributor of Flavella Issues, an international academic organization focused on studying, advocating informal development around the globe. Currently, Andrew works with RGU Architects and teaches architecture architectural design at the University of Idaho. Thank you. Second.
Spencer, can you hear me? Hey, how's it going?
Share your screen, Andy.
Sure.
And,
And everybody can hear me okay? Can everyone hear me okay?
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
You're muted here. Oh, just a second. I think you're muted. 1 second.
Okay. You can hear me okay?
Okay, can you talk?
Yep. Can you hear me now?
I can't hear you. No.
Let me see.
Hello? Can you hear me? Oh, wait, hold on. Just a second.
I'm not muted on my.
We're good.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right.
Can you share your screen?
What now?
Can you share your screen?
Share the screen, yeah. You got it. Well, it's good to be with you guys tonight. I'm going to see if I can kind of coordinate both of these things, the verbal part and the visual part. I've never done this by Skype before. So is my screen shared now?
No, we don't see. We don't see.
Oh, okay. Let me try this again.
Now we see.
Better?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So let me. Oops. How's that? Is that the presentation up there now?
Go ahead and hit present. Top right.
Got it. Okay. So this ended up being like a series of aphorisms. That's why I have that picture of Nietzsche up there. I felt like I was, stuck in some sort of philosophical vortex, making up rules for people. And the thing is, I want to sort of be clear up front about a couple things. I think probably for the creative process, listening to somebody else talk about their creative process is probably one of the worst things you can do. Like, I think the most important thing you can do is be out there actually creating something yourself and figuring it out yourself. Because the thing is, like, we all have an idea about how we've figured it out. But the thing is, none of us are experts, and we're just figuring it out as we go also. You know what I'm saying? So the Nietzsche thing here is just to poke fun at what I felt like was a funny thing to do, which is like pass along to you how to be creative when I barely feel like I figured it out myself. Because Nietzsche and a lot of other philosophers sort of came up with ideas about how things work, and they figured it out, and I think none of us have it really figured out very well at all. But the first handful of these things, I think, if you're in design pursuit at all, especially if you're in design school, I think a lot of these things that I'm going to say, or I hope they are anyways, are pretty intuitive, or not intuitive, but that you've run into them already. And this first one, first little aphorism is that design is an iterative process. And that means that you're not going to hit it on the first shot. Like, if you haven't done a revision at least once, you're doing the wrong thing. And the thing, what you need to be doing is give it a first shot, give it an idea, that first flash of inspiration, and then dig into that flash of inspiration, and then keep digging and keep digging. And a lot of times what that means is, once you've established a sort of a concept that you're going after, or some principle that you'd like to pass along, or something about your experience that you'd like to pass along, a lot of times you need to pare it back even until it's less complicated than or it's as uncomplicated as possible in order to get the essence of what you're saying across. So it's an iterative process, and this is something I picked up from my wife, who is a writer. This is something writers tell each other, is that you need to kill your babies. And what that means is you should never get stuck on one aspect of what you're working on, because a lot of times that aspect that you get honed in on can be the thing that blocks out other perspectives for yourself, so that you can't progress, or you can't explore the rest of what you're trying to explore, right? So in the world of writing, this is something I picked up from hanging out with writers, is that they'll write chapters, or they'll include entire characters, and then realize that those things are leading them astray in terms of what the story needs to be in order to be effective at what they're trying to get at. And so they'll have to just abolish a whole chapter, or take out an entire character. And that's what that means, kill your babies. It just means don't get so in love with any particular thing about what you're doing that you can't develop it the ways that it needs to be developed. And the next aspect of this design as an iterative process is that it is a process, and that processes have beginnings and ends, right? The one thing about this is, if you don't start it, you can't begin paring away at it, and you can't begin manipulating the ideas that you've created, right? You have to be in the process, and that means that you have to enter it, and then you have to inhabit it, and you have to inhabit it in a way that's that is true to the initial concept that you came up with, and develops it in ways that might surprise you along the way. About entering the process, I have found, and I think this is kind of I think this aphorism is kind of true. I think as far as I have experienced it, it holds up as well as anything. The first idea that you come up with, the sort of flash of inspiration, is quite often the truest to your experience, and it's truest to the art that you're trying to pursue in that particular avenue. The thing to watch out for is that first flash of inspiration, it came out of it came out of someplace probably subconscious, right? It probably came out of someplace deep within sort of your creative person. So that's why it's the best, or not why it's the best, but that's sort of begins to explain why it might be the truest. However, that version of it may not be the best version of it. And that's where you have to get back into the process. You have to be in the process and be able to recognize which baby to kill and which avenues to explore based on that first flash of inspiration and that first version that you had of it, recognizing that you probably will come up with a better version as you go along the process. This sort of aphorism is something I heard from my wife's best friend, who was a graphic designer, and she got into design long before I did. She'd been practicing as a graphic designer long before I got into architecture, and while I was in other pursuits, she told me that her approach to design was that she was just taking out the trash. And that's not to say that her work is garbage. This is an example at the lower right of her work. I think it's really beautiful. But the way she looked at it was that she wasn't going to get too serious about it. She wasn't going to get so precious about it. It was just like something inside of her that she needed to take out, right? And so that's the kind of silly way of saying that. And the advantage to that is that then you refuse to take yourself so seriously. Like here you have the image of Peter Eisenman. There's a lot of architects, especially like kind of in more recent times, architects who feel like, and this is a thing of modernism, modern architecture in general, is feeling like you've got the answers to, and you've got the aesthetic formula locked in, and it's and because you're this genius, then you have this ability and this sort of natural right by your genius to pass it off onto other people, and simply you're a person making a creative thing. There's you know, a million other ways to skin that particular cat, and you could just as easily have fun and not get all locked down, right? So the two dangers in taking yourself too seriously are not just with the Peter Eisman thing, but one of the dangers, as I've identified it, is intimidating yourself to even start something, right? If you take yourself too seriously, then you stand to inhibit the even starting the creative process, because or once you've started it, to stop yourself because you think it might not be good enough, right? This punk band right here is called Fugazi, and they started making punk music when they were in their teen years, and they looked at it in a lot the same way that my friend that's a graphic designer looked at it, which is just they had something inside them, they wanted to get it out. They didn't care how well they played their instruments. It didn't matter to them. They just wanted to get it out, and so they did, right? And they started their own record label. It became one of the most influential music groups in American music history, but primarily just because they just started and they just got going, and that they kept that sort of do-it-yourself aesthetic all the way until today, and they've been making music for 30, 40 years, whatever it is. The other danger of it is this is kind of that Peter Eisenman thing of sort of getting locked into your own sort of ideology, or your own way of thinking, or your own way of going about it. In American English, there's a silly term or colloquialism that's called navel gazing, meaning that you're just peering at your own belly button, contemplating your own self, and you don't get out of that in order to begin sharing your art in a way that's sort of freer of that self-consciousness and taking yourself too seriously like that. Another sort of aphorism that I've come up with, or that I've acknowledged, is that as much as I sort of want to view design or creativity as something organic and something that springs out of sort of just your being, what it comes down to is sort of mechanical synthesis. Like the only way we are even able to create anything is by pulling aspects of that thing that we're going to create out of our personal lived experience, right? We're always going around absorbing things about our world and producing something, right? In the same way that this flower spreads its roots into the soil, the only way the plant made the flower was spreading itself into the soil and gathering the ingredients for the flower out of the soil, and it's making a flower out of soil, right? It's taking the elements that its roots are exposed to and making this new thing out of it. And the sort of reverse of this is that sometimes, as I said, we sort of think of art as sort of organic and arising naturally. The other aspect of it is, a lot of times I find for myself that I get to that synthesis by exploring the world, by actually picking it apart, by looking at pieces of things and making something new out of the pieces that I've pulled apart of a new thing, right? So kind of the last thing, and I've heard a lot of this from the other speakers, but the last thing I would say is, just like the roots of that flower, I feel like the most important thing about a creative person is being open to experience the world, right? So recognizing that maybe this art doesn't spring from me, but that it comes through me because I'm absorbing the world. Just like that flower and its roots, I'm absorbing these wonderful things about the world, and they're passing through me, and they get to be something else, right? So this landscape, for example, and I heard other of the panelists talking about the influence that landscape had on them. This is a landscape from my youth that continues to affect who I am and the way I do things and the way I think and the way I feel all the way through my entire life. And this image right here is just to show how, when you have this openness and sort of lack of self-consciousness, there's so many beautiful things everywhere you go. I went to this location because it was beautiful, and I know it to be beautiful, and I know it to be a peaceful place. And then I get there, and there's this wonderful little old couple fishing for trout together, and they look to be about 85 years old, and they're still out fishing together. It struck me as sort of silent and beautiful and peaceful. Again, something that I've drawn inspiration from, that continues to influence the way I live and the way I do things, is a traditional shelter of the American Plains Indians, which I learned how to manage when I was a little kid from other people with Native heritage, and that sense of connecting yourself through your habitation to a place struck me and still strikes me to this day. Quite often, I've noticed that it's something as simple as the light reflecting off a building, or mold growing on a building, or things like this. This guy, Aldo Leopold, was the father of ecology, and he continues to influence who I am. He said that to be an ecologist, and I feel like this is true of artists too, or of anybody involved in creativity, is that we inhabit a world of wounds. And as an artist or as a creative individual, our job is to take that anguish or the wounds and make something understandable and beautiful out of it. Again, just being a conduit by seeing beautiful things wherever they might be, for whatever reason, and I still don't understand it really. This patch of gravel with all the different textures and patterns struck me as wonderful. Unexpected places and unexpected architecture has often affected me deeply. This is a favela in Brazil that the architecture seemed to spring organically out of its surroundings and struck me deeply. This was on the way up to visit the Highline Trail, and the rivets and the history and the texture here struck me. Vinicius de Moraes, the Brazilian pioneer of bossa nova music, said, "Life is the art. Life is the art of the encounter," meaning that what we get out of life or we make our life and artwork by experiencing life, right? And that experience goes to contribute to the art that we present. All of that turns into who you are. All of that lived experience pools together and creates a bundle of facts that represent who you are, and that stuff is what's going to come out. Inevitably, that's what's going to come out in your art. And so you are just a conduit for your lived experience, right? And that is one of the wonderful things about art, is that each of us have our own little packet, and each of us contribute to art in the best in our individual way. And here, this is just another punk rocker, Joe Strummer. somebody I ran into when I was just a little kid. He's passed away now, but he was famous for saying no input, no output, meaning that if you're not involved in the creative struggle, there can be no creative output, right? So that's it. That's my presentation. Thank you very much for not falling asleep if you haven't in fact fallen asleep. And I guess it's time for the panel discussion. Looks like some of you guys are kind of falling asleep. Wake up.
I appreciate all of the speakers today. It seems like they have a little bit more to say than we had planned for due to the overrun. We'll just end without the panel discussion. Appreciate all of your time and attention today. We're very grateful for all of the presenters who did today's effort, as well as the college for hosting and for providing facilities for us to hold this event. And we're hopeful that you found some inspiration and useful tidbits you can take away as we move into our own creative process, the design process here at the College of Design and the School of Public Architecture here at Michael Graves. And with that, big round of applause for the presenters. Thank you so much.